I just want to say thank you so much to RJ Julia for hosting us. This is my local store, and it's probably the best local store you could have. I'm a little biased, but I love it here. So thank you so much for having us. And thank you so much to everybody for coming. We have a little bit of a Connecticut connection with this book. Lev's parents live in Chester, and I live in Madison. So part of the book was actually edited at the library just across the way. So we have the book was sort of, well, not me here, but a little bit.
Fine.
Yes, it was refined in Madison, Connecticut. You can start like putting that on the books. So Kristen did such a good job of introducing the book, but do you have like a little bit of an introduction that sort of talks about the characters and who they are?
I mean, I think normally I say we open with Andy Mills, who is just kicked off the San Francisco Police Department in 1952 after being caught in a raid on a gay club. And what happens then is he's contemplating suicide, really sort of drinking his life away, when a woman sits down next to him at the bar and says, "I know who you are. I know why you were fired, and I want to hire you to solve the murder of my wife." And she takes him to the titular Lavender House, which is a house unified around the Lavender marriage, which is when a gay man and a lesbian married each other for appearances, which was fairly common, Hollywood, government jobs, stuff like that. Once there, he encountered this family, and the family is complicated. It's a complicated family tree. Sometimes when I talk about it, I want to diagram it. So there is Irene LaMontagne, who is the matriarch and the owner of this soap empire that they all are funded by, essentially. And she had previously been married. Her husband died, but she had his child. And shortly after the child was born, she meets Pearl, and they fall in love, and they raise the child together. And so publicly, Pearl was Irene's secretary, and their son, Henry, is the inheritor of the empire. And so he is also queer, and they knew right off the bat, soap 1952, you got to stay squeaky clean. So they found him a wife, and that is Margot. And then we also have Henry, that's the son's boyfriend, Cliff, Margot's girlfriend, Elsie, and Margot's mother, who has come to stay with them after falling on hard times. And so it's a fun little family tree. And now that Irene is dead, everyone sort of, the head of the pyramid is gone, and everyone is sort of vying for the top position. And I can get more into each of those characters if you want.
I love all of them. I love all of them, and I love that they are all in this it's very much a locked room mystery, and it's a locked room mystery on different levels. It is literally a locked room mystery because they all live on this amazing country estate with like the flowers and the perfumes and the staircases. We can talk more about staircases. And it's also a locked room because none of these people can live their lives openly outside of the estate. So they are locked in for the murder, and then their characters are kind of locked in also. And the characters are amazing. Do you have a favorite character?
No.
No, they're all.
Yes. Never choose a favorite. Obviously Andy and his journey, which you helped so much with, is the one who we follow, the one whose mind we're inside, whose eyes we see through the entire time. And so in that sense, we're closest to him, and I'm closest to him because of that. But so many of them are like reckoning with the things they were willing to give up to get this sort of free life. Mm-hmm. And because of that, I love each of them in different ways. Like I can go on about Margot because Margot, has molded herself. Margot, who used to wear motorcycle jackets at lesbian bars, has molded herself into a perfect 50s housewife so that when she goes in public, she looks like a perfect 50s housewife and everyone thinks she is and will buy the soap. And So I love that journey and like how much of herself she's given up to obtain what she thinks is freedom,
Mhm.
and how she's just sort of realizing exactly where she is with that. And that's that's fascinating to me. And then counterpoint, we have her girlfriend, Elsie, who runs a gay club in the city and doesn't live in the house and has actual freedom and wears suits and is like fun. And so does it mean that she's sort of pulled between the wealth and fortune of the house and Elsie's sort of reckless club lifestyle? So Margot is really fascinating to me. And I love Cliff a lot too, partially because originally I really wanted to sort of play with a lot of noir archetypes. And so one of the ones I came up with is sort of the drunk, floozy femme fatale. And there are many femme fatales. I taught a whole class on femme fatales. And so I made it into an homme fatale. And he's just so much fun to play with because he was in the army, but he was he was a chorus boy. He's used to like performing, and now all of a sudden he's trapped in this house.
Yeah. It is incredibly atmospheric, as you can like probably tell with the soap and the fashion in the 50s. But speaking of the noir, I just want to make sure I get the quote straight. We had Lavender House got a starred review in Book Page. And the big pull quote is Lev Rosen is breaking new ground in noir. And so can we talk a little bit about the evolution of Lavender House, where you got the idea and sort of, the movies that you were taking it from and how you've gotten to breaking new ground?
I mean, I will say, I don't think I'm breaking new ground. Don't get me wrong. I love that quote. I love that cover. I love people saying that about me, but it is worth noting that there are many other queer authors who have been writing queer noir for a long time. And, if we're lucky, this is just a breakthrough moment. And I'm lucky enough to be the name attached to it. I have always loved noir. I was really sort of raised on it. Bogart and McCall movies. I can I can talk about all the differences between the various versions of The Big Sleep. And I'm really raised on the movies before the books. And I love the movies, but they are different from the books because they were created under the Hays Code. And so I did eventually go to the books, and I've read everything by Chandler multiple times at this point. And I love the way he cuts a sentence, and I try to do that as well. But those books can feel a little more hopeless at the end than the movies do. Obviously there are very hopeless noir movies too. But when I think of the ones I love, Big Sleep, Laura, stuff like that, they tend to end at these moments of people still acknowledging that the darkness is closing in around them, but they found someone else. They found someone and they can face that darkness together, and it'll probably crush them, but they're together. And that vibe is so important to the way I look at noir. But I always wanted to do something, my previous book, Depth, was also noir. I just also made it science fiction, because I was and I think part of that was I didn't feel like I could write a queer protagonist in a mystery yet. Certainly queer protagonists in literature were more niche when that book came out and when I was writing it. But after writing 2 young adult books with queer protagonists, I think I felt more ready to take on what that would be and like conquer sort of the original noir queer vision. And it all just blends perfectly together, because if you look at these lives that people were living in the 50s, this fear of people discovering who you were, because if you were queer in the 50s, you could easily get kicked out of your house, you could lose your job, although that's still true today. And you were always filled with this feeling of paranoia, and that itself is an inherently noir thing. So like queer lives were noir lives, and so it just blends.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. But I love that you have that optimism and that hope in Lavender House. It's a funny book to describe because, you know, it's a murder mystery. So it's a lot of murder mystery. And it's, you know, about these marginalized characters who have all of these incredibly difficult things to deal with in their day to day, but it's also really fun. It's so much fun. There's the fashion and the soap making and this beautiful estate, and all the characters are just, they're a blast to read. It's a really entertaining book. And so I love that it does have that hope to it too, and that there's hope in it. And you did so much research for this, so much research for this book. Was there a favorite, or a really, maybe not the favorite, because I know that's a terrible question to ask anyone on the spot, but a favorite thing that you discovered while you were researching?
Favorite thing. I mean, there's so much pre-Stonewall queer history that no one is like ever taught in school unless they actively seek out like queer history classes. And certainly as a gay man, I never really knew what my history was in that sense. So discovering all of it is always so exciting. And I owe a lot to Nan Alamilla Boyd's Wide Open Town, which is a history of queer San Francisco up until 1965. That was like my Bible for this, and I need to mention it every time we talk about research. But I think, okay, no, the weirdest thing I found out that I was still sort of baffled by is that women were not allowed to tend bar in the state of California until the 70s. Because they were worried the ladies would be spiking the men's drinks. So that's why, like, fun, weird, what the hell.
But they could own a bar.
Yes, they could absolutely own bars.
We've had this conversation in the manuscript.
Yeah.
Like, what is happening?
They could own bars, they just could not tend bars. And there were cocktail waitresses who could bring the drinks from the bar to the table, but they were not allowed to mix the drinks themselves. So, you know, I think that, I don't know, what are my favorite bits of queer history? I love that the oldest continuous gay rights organization in the United States is a motorcycle gang. It's been around since 1954. I love the Mattachine Society, and I've used the Mattachine Society before. I used it in camp. In camp, I have this actual sort of anecdote from people who are members of Mattachine in the 50s, where there was a woman who, much like Margot, you know, is very butch originally, and wears motorcycle jackets, has never worn heels in her life. But Mattachine, after their split in 52, and the original founders leave to form one magazine, the rest of the Mattachine Society becomes their whole philosophy is we're just like everybody else, except for the fact that we're attracted to our own sex. So we must behave exactly like everyone else. And so they took this woman and they taught her how to walk in heels. And it was like a big deal, and they applaud.
Oh boy.
And like that was sort of what it became, which is so weird when you think about gay rights. And like you look at, if all you know is Stonewall, looking at earlier gay rights organizations like Mattachine is so weird.
It's fascinating. It's a fascinating history. I think it's one we don't know, enough about. So
yeah, and it's so much fun.
It is fun. It is fun. And speaking of fun, because I'm the editor, I get to do like a little extra commercial for how beautiful this book is. It's so beautiful. And all the credit goes to Lev for his brilliant ideas, and to Katie Klimowitz, who is one of our designers.
And Colin Verity, the artist.
Yes, and Colin Verity, of course. Do you want to talk a little bit about the process?
Oh my God, this process. Okay, so I am spoiled by this process. In that almost, if you were unaware, almost every other, sorry, I just noticed someone from high school in the audience. So every other book situation every other book I published, essentially what happens is I write a little memo and I'm like, here are my thoughts on the cover. And I send to my editor and they say, okay. And then usually that is completely ignored. I assume trash because that's what editors do.
Yes,
But,
that's right. Right, trash can.
But in this case, I sent the memo in and I got an email. Was it from you or from Katie where it was like, I want to meet this guy. He sounds weird.
From me. But it was just a really wonderful experience. So usually what happens is not that the editor throws it in the trash. The editor looks at the author's ideas, looks at other books in the marketplace, because we want to make sure we're attracting the readers that would like this type of book. And then we talk to the art department so that they can come up with the vision. And so I did that with Katie, the artist, and she came back and she said, look, I have this artist, I want to work on this. You're not going to get it. Get it? That's fine. She's like, you're not going to get it. She sends me this portfolio. It's like horror and like drooping eyeballs. And I'm like, Katie, I think we have a fundamental misunderstanding of what this book is. And she's like, no. She did like a PowerPoint of like why this guy was going to be great. And at the end of it, I just said, you know what? Like, you're so good. She does amazing work. I said, I'm just going to get out of your way. You you do it. And so she talked to Lev, and then you guys worked with Colin, and
it was just, it's definitely hands down one of the best sort of cover experiences I've had, I think, because I was involved, which normally doesn't happen. But I remember the PowerPoint, and I remember I remember there was in his portfolio sort of wallpaper stuff. And one of the wallpapers, as sort of an example of this horror level, was it was beautiful wallpaper with peacock patterns on it. But if you looked at the peacock's tails, instead of an eye pattern on them, it was literal eyeballs. So that's the kind of stuff that like we were seeing. But I was like, but I like the wallpaper. That's pretty cool. And I remember Katie was like, all right, we'll send him the book, and he was a queer artist. And he actually read it, which not every cover artist did. And Katie said, we'll hire him for 3 concepts or something. And he came back with 6. He loved the book. And I've since spoken to him, and he's so enthusiastic about it. And he came back with a bunch of different concepts, and somewhere in there we started talking about the dead rabbits, which you did not like.
No, I don't. You, right?
So there are rabbits on the cover, and what's so great about it is like you notice new things about it every single time. I was talking to someone at some other tour stop, it's all a blur now, and they were like, when I was holding it up, they're like, I just noticed it's a silhouette.
Wow. Okay.
And the silhouette was not the first thing I noticed either. It took me a moment in the original sketch. And then there's the rabbits, and then one of them is dead, and there's like blood dripping from the actual lavender on the wallpaper. So there's all these details we just keep coming back to, and it's fantastic. And what Katie did is she took this art and she was like, all right, let's have fun. And so there's spot glaze, right? That's spot gloss on the title, on my name, whatever, but also on the eyes of the living rabbits. And that, which is like so creepy, because like you will see them flash depending on how you're holding it.
It's so cool. So you should never judge a book by its cover, but this one does in fact. Like, the story is as good as the art is as good. So it's a perfect match.
And I will tell you this, on the book design, there are 2 hidden rabbits. And I will not tell you where they are. If you ask nicely later, I will. But right now, there are 2 hidden rabbits, not on the front, but like around the book, let's say.
Yeah.
And that was all Katie. She had so much fun with them.
Absolutely. It's beautiful, and the story is fantastic, and we've been so excited. It was an October library reads pick, which is a huge, librarians pick maybe, I don't know, it's 5 or 10 books out of the thousands that are published every month to highlight. The indie bookstores put it in their gift guide for holiday shopping. So if there is anyone on your list that would love a beautiful book, it's a gift guide. I had a great review in the New York Times. I mean, it's been getting a ton of attention. So we're super excited about it. Has anybody reached out, like, have you gotten any fan mail yet? I know it just came out last week. So have you gotten anything like exciting or weird?
You know, when
or-
arcs were going out, I definitely got people reaching out to be like, I love that, you know, I love it. I got one guy who reached out and said, I never buy books, but I'm buying yours. Congratulations on the hype. And I was like, I don't know what to make of that. And then he apparently had messaged me before and he had said, hey, where he had called me handsome. And that was also kind of creepy and kind of like he'd been like, hey, congratulations on the book, handsome. And like, you know, what do you say to that? So I just wrote, thank you. And again, when he said congratulations on the hype, thank you.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, it hasn't been out too long. I've seen TikToks. The young people, they like the
The
book.
young people like
The
the. I
young
wouldn't
people
know.
like the book.
Young people like the book. I love it.
There was a TikTok with the new Game of Thrones actress, the whole Prosecco thing
Okay,
that went, yeah. Okay.
You like
The young
how-
person is there was like, I was mean, let's say. Yes, it's, I don't entirely understand it, but I think it's done.
okay.
So that.
Send it to me and we'll find a young person.
Yeah.
Like, look at it and tell us
Troy?
if it's good or not. Troy,
Troy.
can you tell us
Yeah.
if it's good?
But thus far, you know, nothing too crazy. The New York Times review was great. That was like a career bucket list item, so I'm really thrilled about that.
Yes, absolutely.
And yeah, no, it's I'm hoping. It's funny because you know when you write YA, you get this like tend to get really heartfelt. Sort of like, oh God, I don't know what to do with my family. Like I'm closeted. Sort of fan mail. I don't know what I'm gonna get for this. I assume murderers. This reminds me of the time I murdered. So, and I'm looking forward to it.
This book, which we should talk about. What's next?
Oh yeah, well, I mean, Kristen talked about the 3 books I have out next year, which will undoubtedly result in my mental collapse. But the sequel to this, The Bell in the Fog, is out next fall.
Right.
And you have to get it back to me.
I do.
With the edits.
It's, well, I'm here. So
I guess that's a good excuse. But yeah, so that I'm excited about that because without getting too spoilery, you know, this is the issue with talking about mysteries and why I like tend to focus on history and why I wrote it. Like you can't talk about mysteries, right? You can't because you give so much away. But without getting too spoilery, at the end of this book, Andy is presented with an opportunity to essentially become a private investigator, which he takes. And the second book is several months later, and he's trying to be an investigator to the queer community in the 50s. And he's not having much luck because he was a cop, and the queer community does not trust a cop. And so he is trying to make ends meet, and suddenly a mysterious figure from his past shows up in his office. And that's where I've been pretty much summarizing it.
okay.
It's another fun sort of noir trope, you know, the woman sitting down next to him at the bar, the mysterious figure from his past walking into the office. So I like having fun with all of that.
Yeah, it's very good. It'll come out next October. I'm almost done. But it is very much, if this book is about sort of finding your place in a community and like finding a family, the next book is very much about like what you would do to keep that family too, which is really great.
I think it is also sort of going bigger. Like this is a house with the queer, like the queer community is a house.
Right.
And the second one, it's San Francisco. He's going all over San Francisco to these various gay bars, which are all inspired by real gay bars from the 50s in San Francisco. And yeah, it was a lot of fun to write. Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. I'm very excited to finish working on it. Also, a book that is being refined in Madison, Connecticut. So exactly. So yeah, So I guess I have one last question, which is if you were casting your book,
Mhm.
if you're casting your book with old, we're gonna use, so we don't get into any trouble, we're gonna use old actors, so 30s.
And it's more fun that way anyway.
Yeah.
You know, it's I love the movies, so this is such a like fun game. I think the one that I came up with that I really like is for Margot. I would go with Jean Tierney, and not Laura Jean Tierney, but Leave Her to Heaven Jean Tierney, where she was much sort of colder and it's like silly murdering people left and right. She like that vibe of that chilliness that she imparts in that movie is like perfect for Margot, I think. I think Katharine Hepburn, another, wonderful Connecticut connection,
That's right.
would make a great Elsie. And then it gets harder. Andy, I'm not really sure. I really don't know with Andy.
Okay.
Cliff, I kind of want to be like, Cliff could be Cary Grant, but he could also be a sort of darker, Cary Grant almost too charming. So yeah, that's Jean Tierney is Margot is the one I really love.
Perfect, awesome. So should we open up to questions? So
do.
does anybody have any questions?
So it sounds like this has been an amazingly productive period for you. Or the real question is how do you manage to get so many books? Like, how was it that they all came together? I know you, for publishing, you have submitted that way before, but it seems like a lot is going on.
I think the reason I have 3 out next year is just sort of a pile up. Part of it is just that the industry sort of really slowed down for a while. And so books that we had with people, editors were getting back to us for a while. And then all of a sudden they were. And all of a sudden it was 3 books out next year. But part of it is also selling stuff on spec, which I did with the one that's out at the end of next year. So that I only just finished. And yeah, it ebbs and flows. Like Camp came out in what, 2020. So it's been a few years since I had any books out, and now next year I have 3. So I think it's really just a matter of sort of luck and other people's schedules, but as long as you keep writing, and your agent keeps sending stuff out, there's stuff out there, and hopefully someone bites.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Yes.
Lady in the back. As someone who also both likes the writing and the reading of historical fiction, I was wondering, because you're talking about it with such enthusiasm, right? Like when do you know you have enough? Like when you're doing that sort of like where is the line at which, and does it kind of keep going back and forth? Do you go back and look for more detail? Like, how do you go about that? Not world building, but kind of excavating process.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And there is no enough essentially. Like there's a line in Lavender House, and it's like one throwaway line about Elsie wearing a suit, the way she's dressed. She is in a suit, but she's got dangly earrings on and a necklace, I think. And Andy thinks, she looks feminine enough that she wouldn't be hassled by the cops. And this line has gone through many, many restructurings. Originally, it was something about how she was following the rule of 3, which was this idea that if you were wearing at least 3 objects of your own gender, you were not violating any cross-dressing laws. And it turns out that although that's sort of a common idea, that is not necessarily what the law was place to place. And so the states and cities all had different laws about cross-dressing, and the cops enforced each of those laws depending on their whims, as they do today. So I would say that line got sort of muddled. I got so wrapped up in the sort of technicalities of what it would have to be until I realized the better way to do it is to make it personal. The cops I knew wouldn't have hassled her. Like, that isn't about the technicalities of the law anymore. It's about his own experience with homophobia in this world. And so I think, yes, you have to excavate, you have to know what you're talking about, but as you know, with anything, everything is sort of not as clear cut as it seems. And once you have that information, you can essentially figure out a way to make it work for you by bringing in the characters more. But you definitely have to know what you're talking about. So yeah, there was a lot of research. I spent a lot of time researching that one line before I was like, I don't even know anymore.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I got one more for you if nobody else has.
Yeah, go for it.
So we had another author who had a mystery book a while back who blew my mind and my hair back because she was talking about, as she was pacing, creating this, like, and she was also like a statistician, right? Like, she was like taught statistics at university, so on and so forth. She talked about this coefficient of tension that she would look for throughout the book to make sure that, like, twists were being unveiled at the right moments, or like revelations were coming at the right time, and the kind of, the story was progressing at a reasonable pace, which to me sounded fundamentally terrifying. So I'm looking for alternatives.
Coefficient, yeah.
Coefficient of tension.
Spreadsheet.
No, I mean, like, yeah, no, she was going over her whole process, and as you can tell, my questions are usually like writer and process oriented, but like I was like, that's fascinating and horrifying, and you should be studied perhaps by yourself for science. How do you go about the kind of like blocking process of figuring out the pacing? Because it was sort of like delicious, right? Like, there's at the end of every chapter, you're like, and you have to keep reading. So how do you do that?
Well, I mean, anything with a coefficient is not something I would.
Thank God.
But yeah, no, if you want a chapter, you really have to be thinking about the chapter endings. If you want that gotta turn to the next page vibe, it is about what sort of note you end on. It always has to end on sort of a note of suspense generally, if you want to get your reader to turn the next page. But I don't sort of plan out twist here, twist there. I let it happen a little more organically than that. I know there are many writers who don't. There are spreadsheets out there that are like very specific outlines. This twist happens 66% of the way through the book, this one 12%, whatever. And some people find those very helpful. I have like looked at them and been like, no, I don't know. It just feels a little forced and artificial. I think every book, has its own sort of progress and writes itself differently. So the idea of a formula feels inauthentic to me. But definitely, if you want, just think about what your reader should be doing at each moment, what you want your reader to be doing. And if you want them to be turning the page, you have to end in such a way that they're going to be turning the page.
It's really good author advice. Do I want my audience to keep reading this book?
Yeah, essentially.
It's really good. Anything?
At one level, the book sounds like I haven't read it yet, but just a fun, great murder mystery. But on another level, as you were sort of alluding to, the context, in the sense that this is part of gay culture and is coming out at a moment of a lot of change in the United States. Language change, backlash change, all kinds of politics around this kind of subject. So my question is, how much do you have to sort of have your sensitivity or your antenna up about, language or politics around this? And I'm just curious whether it's anything that you sort of consciously think about.
I don't think about it too much. Certainly, with my young adult books, one of them has been banned all over the country, and I've seen videos of priests calling me a pedophile, so like I am aware of it, and obviously but I'm not out to take part in that conversation in the like sort of antagonism, the political antagonism that's happening right now with my books. Yes, I want people to read my books and be like, oh gosh, it was hard to be queer in the 50s. Oh gosh, there are still things that are true about the 50s that are true for queer people that are still true today. Like I want those truths to still radiate forward, but I'm not thinking about the way someone will be like, I can't imagine my book is going to sway someone incredibly homophobic into believing queer people deserve equal rights. I don't think that I don't know how that would work exactly. It's a lovely sort of thought, and certainly I do believe reading develops empathy, but I think that those people who think like that aren't going to pick up the book in the first place. And so, I'm thinking about my audience, and my audience is someone who is already willing to sort of see what it was like to be queer in the 50s with a sympathetic eye. And maybe it's not super sympathetic, but hopefully I can make it more sympathetic. And yeah, but I try not to think about it too much.
Can I just follow up for a second? Yeah, you said that your book has been, or one of the books has been banned across the United States.
Yes.
Who engages on your behalf in that case? I mean, are you, are there organizations that try to battle that one, or?
The ACLU. I just gave a speech to not a speech, but on a panel with the ACLU yesterday, no, the day before yesterday. So they are actively sort of trying to counteract it, but there are on the ground grassroots organizations that are trying to fight book banning all over the country. And more importantly, what I have to do, I can't prevent a book banning because these are all local community issues, but the local community can. And so when people reach out to me, what I always tell them is to like get everyone involved. Find your people, make sure they show up to school board meetings, town council, library board meetings, whatever, so that they can make sure that they outnumber the voices who want these books banned, because in most places they do. It's just about showing up, and that is the strongest message I can give to anyone. But there are smaller organizations that you can find, usually through the ACLU, that are fighting on individual levels. And it's worth noting that these groups that are trying to ban the books, like Moms for Liberty, whatever, they are not grassroots. They are heavily funded by dark money. And someone just did a whole article on this with the ACLU. And so that's what you're really sort of fighting against. We have numbers, they have money, and it's just about making sure that the numbers show up.
I just have one question.
Yeah.
You said there's a sequel coming out next year?
Yeah.
So you like envision like a series, or are you done?
Yes, I do. It was a 2-book deal, so nothing is guaranteed beyond the
Okay.
sequel. But I would like to continue it, yes.
I don't know if we can end on a higher note than that. So we have copies of Lavender House on sale around the corner. Several of you I know have already bought it. For those of you who are engaging in the RJ Julia events card and haven't gotten your things stamped yet, please feel free to do that on the way out. Lev is also going to be very generously signing copies of the book around the corner as well. So if you'd like to see him up close and personal around the way, we're going to be doing that next. So let's give a big round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us.